Chapter 61, Imminent Danger. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Sour milk. Murong Shue smiled. Sour milk. What's that? They have heard of cow milk, goat milk, and know that cow milk were from cows while goat milk were from goats, but sour milk. Could it be possible that there is an animal named Sour? Sun Feng and Wu Heng looked at each other, then turned to look at Murong Shue with a puzzled stare. Murong Shue smiled. Sour milk isn't produced from an animal. I used cow milk to make it. It can ease digestion and it's good for your stomach. It's best consumed after eating oily or cold food. I knew we wouldn't be able to eat any properly prepared food in the mountain, so I brought some. Come try it. Thank you very much, Miss Murong. Sun Feng and Wu Heng never really liked milk all that much, but they were especially interested in it. So they each took a cup to have a taste. The thick liquid flowed from their throats into their stomachs, and they instantly felt the warmth course through them. Their eyes brightened and they each gave their praise. Not bad. Not bad. This is really something. Looking at the two gulping down her concoction, Murong Shue smiled. She then held it out before Ouyang Xiaochen and said, "Come try it too." Sure. Ouyang Xiaochen nodded and took a sip. Don't you dare tell me it isn't good. Murong Shue glared at him with a threatening gleam in her eyes. Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes lit up with humor and said, "Not bad." Ouyang Xiaochen never liked milk because it held a strong aroma in it. However, the milk Murong Shue had made was rid of the aroma and had a sour taste in it. It made him feel warm inside. That's more like it. The corner of Murong Shue's mouth curled into a small smile. She then continued to take slow sips from her cup. At that moment, the hot, sweet and sour taste of the milk coursed through her. She jolted and looked down at her steaming milk. When she had first opened her bottle, it had already cooled down considerably. How did it become hot? She looked at Ouyang Xiaochen. He was holding his cup while gracefully tasting the sour milk. It was such a simple action, yet the way he did it was very elegant. Steam also rose from his cup of sour milk. Murong Shue's brow raised. Ouyang Xiaochen indeed had been the one behind this. But how did he do it? Nonetheless, she admitted to herself that drinking hot sour milk was way better than drinking the cold one. The Qin Yen Palace had only 3 guards left. They sat by the fire and casually ate the dried-up fish grilled by the fire. Secretly, they admired the people sitting at the other side. Sun Feng and Wu Heng were also guards like them, but they were far better off. They sat in front of the fire eating the grilled fish which smelled wonderful and drinking the sour milk. Their lives obviously were more comfortable than theirs. The ingredient used to make the grilled fish more scrumptious and the sour milk were both from Murong Shue. She had initially been Prince Jing's first wife. Be, if he hadn't fallen in love with Qin Yuyuan, then the person beside him would have been Murong Shue. Her grilled fish, sour milk would have been offered to them instead. They secretly stole a glance at Qin Yuyuan. She didn't know how to defend herself. Whenever their excursion had met danger, she had to rely on them for protection. Even if she didn't get in their way during those dangers, she had immensely slowed down the pace of this excursion. She didn't know how to cook either. They would normally have dried grilled fish and cold water as their meal. Even though they were accustomed to this, but that didn't mean it didn't do any damage to their stomachs in the long term. She also did not have profound general knowledge. She didn't know that the red fruit was poisonous. When Asi ate it, she didn't try to stop him, and that had costed his life. If the person beside Prince Jing now had been Murong Shue, she could have stopped Asi from eating it and he wouldn't have died. If they were to compare, Murong Shue was 1,000,000 times better than Qin Yuyuan. The guards were discussing this discreetly, but Qin Yuyuan had pieced together their murmurs and found out. Her beautiful face fell downcast. How dare they compare her with Murong Shue? Moreover, they had said that she was far better than herself. These guards obviously don't know where their place is. How dare they criticize her? Qin Yuyuan gazed teary-eyed at Yi Chen. She was about to complain to him when she realized he was looking at Morong Shue's direction. His eyes held shades of mystery, doubt, regret. Wait, why would he regret? Maybe he also thought that she was incompetent compared to Morong Shue and was regretting that he had chosen her over Morong Shue. No, 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 how can this be? She was the royal princess of Mo Bay, the king's most beloved daughter. As compared to Morong Shue, who was just a rich orphan, she was a million times better than her. How could she lose to her? She must never lose to her. It was just a simple thing of plucking leaves and scattering it on the fish to make it more delicious, and it was just making cow milk into sour milk. She could have done it too. Qin Yuen spun around and without even turning her head back, she took big steps towards Yi Chen. The wind carried her sullen voice, "Chen, I'm going for a walk." Yi Chen glanced at her. Thinking she was off to do her private business, he didn't pay much attention and calmly responded, "Don't wander too far." "I know." Qin Yuen replied harshly. She then broke into a run and didn't stop until she was panting and couldn't run any further. With hatred, she pulled the grass around her. Yi Chen had really abandoned her. She said she wanted to take a walk. He didn't even oblige to accompany her, he had only replied her with some nonsense. Everything that was because of Morong Shue. That girl didn't learn how to sew and knit, she didn't learn how to play chess or paint, but she had learned how to cook atrociously instead. What a joke. And those low lives actually respect her. The way Yi Chen had been looking at her was worrying too. A shadow dashed past her. Qin Yuen jolted and immediately turned her head. She saw a white mountain wall. Beneath it was a cave opening, there was a black tombstone beside the entrance. A light breeze blew and the grass swayed from side to side, hiding some parts of the black tombstone, making it hard to read what was on it. Mountain wall. Black tombstone. Qin Yuen's thoughts raced and she thought about the true purpose of coming to Yu Mountain. Her eyes gleamed. Could this be the place they were looking for? Yi Chen and herself had been moving around blindly in Yu Mountain for a day but weren't even close to finding what they were looking for. Who would have thought she had stumbled upon it by chance? She wanted to hurry back to tell Yi Chen about it, he would be so happy. Qin Yuen smiled and turned to go back. Suddenly she had a thought. What if she was wrong? Yi Chen would be so disappointed and those guards would have viewed her with more contempt. She needed to make sure this was the place they were looking for. Qin Yuen stopped smiling and treaded slowly towards the black tombstone. With force, she gripped onto it. It turned out to be soft and she widened her eyes with fear. If you're enjoying The Evil Prince and His Precious Wife, The Evil Prince to boost our popularity. Alternatively, you could help sponsor a chapter for everyone. Current amount. $10/$20. Chapter 62, Falling into the Valley. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Slowly, Qin Yuen turned to look at what she had gripped. The black tombstone had turned its head. It had bloodshot eyes. The sight of it made her trembled and made the hair on the back of her neck stood at end. Ah! Qin Yuen screamed and quickly retracted her hand. She was filled with terror. She staggered backwards then turned to run. All the black tombstones had been awakened. Their black bodies flapped their wings and rapidly chased after her. Beside the stream, Morong Shue had just finished her share of grilled fish and sour milk. She was about to spread her mat to sleep when a distressed shout for help was heard, "Help me, help me." Morong Shue turned her head to see Qin Yuen running panically. Behind her, creatures with tall ears, short feet and enormous wings covered the entire sky like a black cloud, blocking out the stars. "Those are bats!" Wu Heng exclaimed. Wu Heng widened his eyes with shock. He knew they loved to live in groups but there were so many of them. "Why are their eyes red?" Sun Feng asked. He had seen many bats. But their eyes had all been black. "They are vampire bats. Run!" Murong Shue's face became pale. She grabbed Ouyang Shaoshan who was beside her and ran. Vampire bats were fierce in nature and blood was their food source. It was impossible to fight a sky full of them. Sun Feng and Wu Heng quickly followed. The guards from Qin Yan all turned to look at Yi Chen, their faces anxious. Prince Jing. The bats were approaching and they could feel their evil aura. If they didn't start running soon it would be too late. Noel.N, let's go. Yi Chen calmly said. He sprinted towards Qin Yuan, grabbed her wrist and started running. Murong Shui raced ahead. She caught a glimpse of Yi Chen and Qin Yuan behind her. Coldly she said, Qin Yuan, how did you provoke them? I have no idea. I came back from strolling around and saw them behind me. Qin Yuan lied, her eyes swept nervously from side to side. She had just wanted to help Yi Chen, she wanted to know if that cave was the place they had been searching for. Little did she know the black tombstone turned out to be disgusting blood-sucking bats. It wasn't intentional, she couldn't be blamed, she couldn't be blamed. Princess Qin, even though vampire bats suck blood to live, they would never initiate an attack unless you breached their territory. When that happens, they will chase you endlessly. Murong Shui coldly threw that fact wide in the open. Qin Yuan's small face turned pale, her eyes were wild with fear. She didn't know what to argue back. Sun Feng and Wu Heng were expressionless. They had already been troubled by the people from Qin Yan once, it wasn't surprising that they were doing it again. The guards from Qin Yan frowned. They could have rested well tonight but now they were being chased by a flock of vampire bats. The question of keeping themselves alive was doubtful. Resting obviously was out of the question. Qin Yuan was a troublemaker, a terrible, high and mighty princess who always seems to drag them back. Yi Chen's face remained stone-cold. His eyes were tilting below, unreadable. Ouyang Shaochen's face was calm, the corner of his mouth curled into a smirk. He held Murong Shue's hand and emerged from the tall grass. Only to find themselves on the edge of a cliff. It was dangerously steep and the fall was neck-breaking. Beneath, the dark valley lurked with menace. One couldn't see what was below. It's a dead end. The Qin Yan guards jolted and stopped at the nick of time. More than 10 vampire bats were behind them and in a flock, they descended onto one of the guards. Their razor-sharp teeth sunk deeply into his flesh and quickly drank his blood. Ah, the guard wailed, his face was filled with horror. His young body was quickly changing. In a flash, he became a dried mass. Frightening rumors about vampire bats really were something to fear about. Murong Shui frowned. She swung her arm and 10 silver coins came flying out. They hit the bat's head with force. The bats are rushing down. Quick, slay them. Sun Feng exclaimed. The remaining Qin Yan guards came to their senses, buried their shock and proceed to slay the coming bats with their swords. Streaks of blood came raining down. One by one the bats dropped dead on the ground. They were quickly piling up. The thick scent of fresh blood was in the air. But the sky remained pitch black full of them, it was as if it hadn't been reduced at all. The Qin Yan guards secretly glared at Qin Yuan. She was incompetent and a failure in many ways, what did Prince Jing even favor in her? Qin Yuan felt the anger and dissatisfaction of the guards but she did not complain. Her small hand clutched onto Yi Chen's robe, she was held in his arms, luxuriated in his protection. There were so many of them, she didn't know when they would all be killed. But she knew, as long as Yi Chen was still alive, she would be very safe. The martial arts of the 2 guards were not even 1/10 as good as Yi Chen's. As time dragged on, she knew the 2 guards would become exhausted and turn into the bat's dinner. She was the mighty Mobei princess, she wouldn't be criticized any longer by 2 of these low lives. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a white robe. It was Ouyang Shaochen. Silently, he stood beneath the night sky, he was as beautiful as a picture. Under his sleeve, his hand clenched and unclenched. His white robe flapped against the wind like a blooming lotus. A gust of strong wind blew and a powerful surge of energy flew out from his sleeve. It surged towards the bats in the sky, and in a flash, some of them were reduced to dust. He was such a handsome, talented man. He should be someone who was elegant and refined. Murong Shui was just some sick girl who was abandoned by Yi Chen. How could she be fit to be with him? And why did he even like her? She then looked at Murong Shui. She was holding a dagger and was slicing the air with impeccable speed. The bats which came before her dagger were sliced clean, their blood splattered onto the ground. It made people stare in awe. Qin Yuyuan squinted. Murong Shui was a powerful enemy, she could not let her grow stronger by the day. She needed to get rid of her quickly. Today presented a good chance, she could get rid of her once and for all. There are too many vampire bats, I'll help too. Qin Yuyuan casually said. She then walked out of Yi Chen's protective arms. In one hand, she held a sword, it was as if she was going to kill the impending bats. Silently, she approached Murong Shui. Countless bats swooped down, Murong Shui was focused in killing them. Suddenly, without warning, someone pushed her, it had caught her off guard, she fell into the dark valley. Meishi's note. Qin Yuyuan, you little. Chapter 63, Beat Up Qin Yuyuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you like this novel, please consider sponsoring a chapter. Murong Shui saw Qin Yuyuan smirking from the corner of her eyes, and she knew what happened exactly on that moment. She grabbed the corner of her outfit furiously, leading her fell off the cliff along with Qin Yuyuan. Shui. Ouyang pulled out his hands to grab Murong Shui, but his soft fingertips touched across her apple-green dress, he could not manage to grab her in time. Her slim figure and Qin Yuyuan fell into the limitless deep dark pit. Ouyang went into a panic attack, he jumped down the cliff and followed Murong Shui. The white robe that he was wearing was particularly visible in the dark surroundings. Shi. Sun Feng and Wu Heng screamed in fear and jumped along with Ouyang, they were his bodyguards, and it was their jobs to protect their masters and followed him wherever he went. Yi Chen was filled with mixed feelings, nevertheless, he spread out his arms like a bat and jumped off the cliff as well. Wang Yi. The bodyguard from House of Jing Wang, Yi was astonished, what did just happen? Why everyone was jumping off the cliff? Yi, let's jump down too. Yelled as he waved around his swords trying to kill those monstrous bats. Yi's eyes twitched at the thought of the deep pit, wasn't he trying to kill himself if he jumped down from here? Groups of black bats flew across them from below the pit, the red eyes of the bats could be clearly seen in the mid-air. Yi's eyes twitched again, there were only both of them left, if they stayed 1 second longer, they would surely become those bats' dinner. Let's jump now, leave everything to our destinies. Alright. Nodded his head and jumped off to the deep pit with Yi. Soft wind blew on their faces as they jumped. The cliff was filled with countless bats and they could see them flying blindly around in front of their eyes. The wind below the cliff was very strong. It pierced their faces sharply as if they were cut by shrill knives. The pit was incredibly deep. Murong Shui opened her eyes and held tightly on Qin Yuyuan's collar. Deep down inside her, she knew that she could not survive such high fall from the cliff, she would be dead by the time her body hit the ground below, but before her life ended, she wanted to get revenge for herself. Pack. Strokes of slapping were placed across Qin Yuyuan's cheeks, she turned her face around and continued slapping her cheeks one side by one side. Qin Yuyuan woke up from the hard slaps and went panic, she regained her consciousness and stared angrily at Murong Shui. Murong Shui, how dare you slap me? Not only I dare to slap you, I'd even dare to kick you. Murong Shui cried in fury, then she kicked Qin Yuyuan at her side with might. A sharp piercing sensation came from her chest, Qin Yuyuan's face was pale and white, beads of sweats were dropping from her forehead. She glared at Murong Shui, waiting to defend herself. Murong Shui's mighty kick hauled forward at her. The pain spread throughout her tiny body, she almost fainted at the throbbing kicks, but Murong Shui did not stop. Murong Shui, be remindful that I'm Mo Bei Prince. Pack. Murong Shui slapped hardly at her face once again. Qin Yuyuan did not even get to finish her sentence. She was half dead and there she went, boasting around about her princess status in Mo Bei, how ridiculous. Qin Yuyuan spat out a mouthful of blood, and scowled at her. Murong Shui, who are you to beat me up like that? You brought the cannibal flower, which affected my journey to find the medicine, and you brought the monstrous blood-sucking bats which made me almost lost my life, and you were so evil-hearted that you pushed me over the cliff without thinking twice. Murong Shui screamed angrily at her, but all Qin Yuyuan could hear was the buzzing sound in her ears. Her mind was completely blank. She thought no one knew what she had planned behind, but who would have ever thought that Murong Shui was smart enough to see through all her tricks? But who cared? Murong Shui was dying very soon, she would have to bring this secret with her into the grave, and nobody else knew about her plans except herself. Qin Yuyan laughed to herself and clutched firmly of Murong Shui's shoulders. Murong Shui startled at her action, she looked down to see pile of tree branches below, and she quickly understood Qin Yuyan's intention. Qin Yuyan was on top of her and with her under the evil princess, she would become the scapegoat when they both fell below. Murong Shui grinned to herself, when she felt the touch of branches behind her. She turned around rapidly and changed her position to be on top of Qin Yuyuan. Qin Yuyuan was horrified at this, she wanted to do something but it was too late, the tree branches went through her back and blood slowly oozed out from the wounds. Qin Yuyuan felt the pressure and screamed in pain, ah! Thud! Qin Yuyuan fell right at her back, the piercing pain went through her body, her screaming stopped and her face went pale instantly. She opened her mouth widely trying to catch some breath, she looked like a dying fish grasping for air. She did not die yet. Murong Shui raised her eyebrows and stood up slowly, she scanned through her surroundings and saw the trees around her were firm and tall. The tree branches acted as a pillow when they both fell, the grass on the ground was soft and intact, that was why Qin Yuyuan did not die from the fall. Murong Shui, you tried to kill me, I will never let you go. Qin Yuyuan gave her a deadly frown, as if she wanted to burn Murong Shui alive with her fury eyes. Shut up. Murong Shui kicked her again and said, you are the one who tried to kill me, that was why I pulled you down with me, you got what you deserve. Qin Yuyuan moaned in pain from the unexpected kicks, her dress was torn by the tree branches and strikes of wounds could be seen on her bare skin, the aching increased as her skin moved on the soft grass. She hitched a breath, she was beyond furious, to think that she was the princess of Mo Bei, the precious daughter of Mo Bei king and queen. Everyone put their highest respect to her, and nobody dared to even touch her finger. Now, Murong Shui had beaten her up, kicked her and scowled at her, she would let her get away with this. Qin Yuyuan leaned on her side despite the pain and yelled, steward. With the calling, 4 ninjas in brown masks appeared in front of them out of nowhere. They gave out dangerous killer vibes, their eyes were as cold as ice, and they bowed in respect, princess. Qin Yuyuan glared at Murong Shui and ordered, kill her and chop her into pieces. Yes. The ninjas replied resolutely, they drew out long shrill swords from their belt and dashed forward to Murong Shui. Note. If you want to support this translation, but can't donate, consider adding us to your ad blockers whitelist. We take intrusive ads very seriously, please contact us if you come across a malicious ad. Chapter 64, Killing Ninjas in Brown. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qin Yuyuan had spies behind her, this was shocking to Murong Shui, those ninjas were skilled in their moves and their martial art were of high level as well, but it was not so easy to get her killed. Murong Shui drew out her swords from her waist as well and ran forward to them without fear. At that exact moment, leaves were rolling and flying around them, their shadows were swift and actions were as fast as lightning. Murong Shue gripped on her sword tightly, the aura of the enemy's threat vanished instantly with her killer instinct. The brown ninja's eyes darkened as they ran forward with their swords pointing in front. They attacked Murong Shue, who was in the center, from all four corners. Murong Shue ducked from three swords quickly, another sword won its way and cut through her hair at her side forehead. Her hair fell gently from her head to the ground. Murong Shue squinted her eyes. These ninjas dressed themselves oddly and their skills were deadly. She was sure herself that they were not from Qin Yan. They were probably the spies sent to Qin Yuan from her father. They were all experienced in their fighting. She was not as trained as them. Moreover, she was all by herself here. She knew that she would not win if she continued fighting. She had to think of a plan to get rid of these ninjas. Murong Shue smiled to herself. With a light tip-toed jump, her slender figure disappeared into the midst of forest. Forest was her territory. Those ninjas could only show their skills outside. Once they went into the forest, they would no longer be the dominant ones. The ninjas in brown quickly followed her into the forest, but all they could see were bushes and trees. There was no Murong Shue in sight. The leader among them ordered, "We shall find her separately." Yes, the rest of them went to their separate ways. They ran to all east, west, south and north directions to search for Murong Shue. The forest was filled with unorganized branches and weeds. It was chaotic inside. The ninjas went on their way with care, their eyes scanned through the surroundings despite the unkempt environment. Suddenly, there was a ruffling sound from behind. One of the ninjas swung his swords towards the directions and the sword cut through a tree trunk. However, there was no one there. He breathed out in relief, knowing it was just the windswept sound of leaves. A beautiful face emerged in front of the ninja out of the sudden. He was overwhelmed, and with that, he stood there frozen as a sword sliced through his throat in 1 second. Blood was spilled out of his throat. He gripped his sliced throat firmly when he realized what was going on. Slowly, the ninja fell at his feet with his hand still around his bleeding throat. His eyes were opened wide and they were filled with perplexing and staggered. Murong Shue looked down expressionless at the body. She then took out a piece of silk handkerchief and proceeded to wipe off the blood stains on her sword. She was the 21st century lady of the Murong's family. She had undergone strict training since young, which included fighting skills, weapon knowledge, guns, hunting methods and medicines. Her household members recruited numerous deadly killer trainers when she was 18 years old. They were supposed to train her skills. She would kill those psychopaths in the mountains when they surrounded her and tried to hunt her down. These few unknown ninjas were absolutely nothing to her. All she had been doing since she arrived at Qin Yan was quarreling with the mother and daughter of Du's house. She did not manage to brush up her fighting skills since then, and now that those ninjas in brown showed up just like that, it was a good practice for her. Murong Shue threw her blood-stained handkerchief into the air, and smirked coldly as she walked towards a direction. Now, the game had changed. She promised herself that she would kill all of the other ninjas. The bushy forest was extraordinarily quiet. The ninjas did not dare to move a single hair. However, they walked steadily step by step with swords in their hands. Their eyes were gazing around and ears were listening carefully for any unusual movements. Murong Shue's slim figure was hanging downwards on a tree branch. Her forehead was right in front of them, and with ease, she sliced her swords across one of their throats. Just like the one before, his blood oozed out and it gradually became a huge pile of blood pool. The ninja's body went stiff and he fell down on the ground, dead. Poor man, he would never know when did Murong Shue went up to his head. Ansan. Murong Shue dashed forward to the voice. She hurried in front of the ninja, who yelled and pierced her sword into his heart directly. Blood spilled out from the attack and filled the glowing evening skies. Murong Shue pulled out her sword from his heart and walked towards the last ninja, with blood dripping from her sword, onto the green grass at her feet. The last ninja was the most powerful one. He strolled carefully around her with his long mighty sword. Murong Shue leaped to him from bushes of trees. Her sword in her hand exploded through his forehead and blood could be seen seeping from the blow. The ninja stunned in his feet, and after a moment, he fell hardly on the ground. Murong Shue won this battle. The 4 ninjas in brown were all dead. now it was her time to get revenge from their master. The clouds in the sky and mist in the surroundings evacuated gradually, the golden sunbeams shone across the airy green land. Qin Yuyuan sat beneath a big tree with torn clothes on her. She was holding on to the medicines gave to her by a ninja. She wiped some of the medicine on her wounds and cringed when she felt the sizzling pain. Murong Shui had wounded her badly. She would not still be contented even if Murong Shui was killed. A ninja in brown walked out from the forest. Qin Yuyuan looked at him and stated coldly, "Is she dead?" "My apology, Princess Qin, I'm not dead yet, sorry to disappoint you." A laugh came from the woods. Qin Yuyuan froze on her spot. She turned to the voice slowly and saw Murong Shui's pretty little face as she pushed the ninja aside. She stuttered, "How? How could that be? Your spies were useless, I killed them all and walked here myself." Murong Shui retorted teasingly. "How could that be?" Qin Yuyuan was practically shouting, those incredible spies were gifts from her father. They were the most powerful and skilled fighters in Mo Bay, they could even defeat the strongest warrior on earth. How could Murong Shui have killed all of them so easily? "It's up to you to believe it, they're all dead, and no one could stand in between my revenge." Murong Shui grinned evilly, and she strode slowly towards Qin Yuyuan. Each footstep she made sounded as if Reaper was revealing herself. Chapter 65, Deeply Wounded Qin Yuyuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qin Yuyuan's face was filled with terror. She screamed and tried to run but instead staggered. Murong Shui's mouth curled into a smirk. She was in front of Qin Yuyuan in mere seconds, blocking her way. She then kicked her and sent her rolling. Murong Shui caught up slowly. Wherever Qin Yuyuan stopped, she would send another vicious kick. It was as if Qin Yuyuan was a rubber ball, each kick sent her rolling. "How dare you drag me down in this? How dare you plot against me? How dare you use me? Ah, ah, ah." Qin Yuyuan, who was sent rolling around in the silent valley, screamed. Her hair was in a mess and her hairpins were scattered all around. Her dress robe had been torn by rocks in many areas and her delicate skin had been scarred countlessly. Qin Yuyuan was in such a miserable state. Gritting her teeth she wailed, "Murong Shui, come kill me, if you dare. Killing you straight away would be mercy. I want to torture you slowly." Murong Shui's chilling answer bore into her ears. Qin Yuyuan's eyes were ablaze with anger. "Murong Shui, you vicious woman. Me. Vicious. Qin Yuyuan, you commanded your henchmen to have me chopped up to pieces, isn't that torturing me? Now that I'm doing this, it is only because I have learnt this tactic from you." Murong Shui smiled and again, kicked her. The skirt of her dress robe tore open and a piece of paper made from goat skin fluttered out from it. Murong Shui blinked and bent down to pick it up. The goat skin paper was yellowed with age and black letters were written on it. There were also black strokes of vertical, horizontal lines and circles. Now that she looked at it, it looked like a map. Murong Shui squinted. She was about to take a closer look at the letterings when Qin Yuyuan, who was deeply wounded, charged at her. "Give it back to me. Get lost." Murong Shui dodged her and kicked her. Unfortunately, the blow had landed on Qin Yuyuan's face. With a cracking sound, Qin Yuyuan spat out two of her teeth and fresh blood. Murong Shui ignored all that, peered at her and proudly said, "This belongs to me now. Seeing that it's mine now, I'll let you die more comfortably. Tell me, how do you want to die?" She didn't know what was written on the goat skin paper and wasn't very interested in it. However, Qin Yuyuan obviously treasured it very much. That was why she wanted to claim it for her own, to anger Qin Yuyuan. "Murong Shui, I'll kill you." Qin Yuyuan cried and charged towards her with a sharp golden hair pin in her hand. Her eyes were ablaze with revenge. Kill her. She obviously didn't know what she was capable of. Murong Shui casually lifted her leg and kicked her again. This time the impact sent her flying 3-4 meters away. Murong Shue came towards her again, her dagger angled at her heart, she was about to stab her. Since she wanted to die so much, she shall grant her wish. Seeing that the sharp dagger was about to pierce through Qin Yuyuan, a hand extended and grabbed Murong Shue's wrist. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't bring it closer to Qin Yuyuan. Murong Shue frowned and looked up. She found herself face to face with Yi Chen's handsome face. He was gazing coldly at her. Murong Shue, you are too vicious. No wonder they're a match for each other, they even described her in the same way. Murong Shue's mouth curled into an icy smile and pried loose of his grip. I learned it from your lover. Yi Chen's sharp eyes swept across from Qin Yuyuan who had fainted to Murong Shue. I have known Yuyuan for 3 years and I clearly know what kind of person she is smart, beautiful and kind. She is not vicious like you. Murong Shue, don't you slander her or else don't blame me for being unkind to you. The moment the words left his mouth, Yi and Er drew their swords and pointed them at Murong Shue. Murong Shue ignored them, the cold smile still curled on her face. Qin Yuyuan, kind. This was the funniest joke she's ever heard. She then quickly lifted the brown shirt man's body and threw it in front of Yi Chen. This is Qin Yuyuan's guard. An hour before, she commanded them to chop me to pieces, she even thought of what way to kill me. This is your Princess Qin, kind indeed. Yi Chen turned a deaf ear towards Murong Shue's sarcasm. His eyes were fixed onto the corpse of the brown shirt man. Suddenly, his eyes had a gleam of shock. It was only for a brief moment but Murong Shue had seen it. Jing Wang, why are so you surprised? Is it because you didn't think that Qin Yuyuan would have her guards kill me or because you did not expect her to have her own guards? Just as she was mentioning that, she suddenly realized that when Yi Chen and Qin Yuyuan met the carnivorous flower and the vampire bats, her guards were nowhere to be seen. That means that even Yi Chen didn't know that she had her own guards. The fact that Princess Qin had her own guards was such an important matter, did she not tell you? Isn't she madly in love with you? Why would she keep this from you? Murong Shue had some feigned surprise in her voice but it was obvious that she was gloating over their misery. It was surprising how Qin Yuyuan and Yi Chen were so similar in some ways. It was such a sudden fact thrown out in the open that it made Yi Chen terribly upset and confused. Angrily he responded, Murong Shue, you need not do that just to ruin my relationship with her. Yi Chen, the state of your relationship with her has been clearly displayed, why would I still need to ruin it? I was here to harvest herbs, not to be chased by carnivorous flowers or vampire bats. You two had dragged me into this, and one of you even pushed me off the cliff, endangering my life. It's fine if you don't apologize but instead, you accused me of ruining your relationship with her. The way the mind of the Prince of War works is indeed wonderful. Murong Shue stared at Yi Chen with contempt and walked away without turning back. Looking at her slim silhouette, Yi Chen squinted and coldly said, where are you going? My business is none of yours, you take care of Princess Qin. I forgot to tell you but Qin Yuyuan has been hurt very badly, you better take her to a doctor quickly. If you're too late, she might just become a corpse. By then, don't say it was because I was jealous, it was all because you were too late, Murong Shue said without slowing her pace. Yi Chen was here so she couldn't kill Qin Yuyuan. That made Dian Grass her first priority now. She would settle things with Qin Yuyuan another day. Yi Chen turned to Yi and Er and gave a knowing look. Yi and Er understood immediately and went to block Murong Shue's way. When you are upset that Qin Yuyuan plus Yi Chen didn't die because that's all you want right now. Chapter 66, Battle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What are you doing? Murong Shue raised her brow and gazed coldly at Yi and Er. The mountain is unsafe, it will be dangerous if you head out alone. Prince Jing would like to invite Miss Murong to travel with us. Yi's sword lowered, even though his voice was calm, it had a sense of command. What if I say no? Murong Shui raised her brow. Travel together. It sounded tactful, but they could either be taking her as hostage or keeping her until Qin Yuan awakens, then avenging for her. She would never believe their lies. Then please excuse us. He pointed his sharp sword at Murong Shui's neck. Murong Shui's lips curled into an icy smile. Her hand made a sudden swing across Ah-E and Ah-Er's wrist. It left a long, thin cut. Blood was spilling from the wound. Thunk, their swords dropped. They couldn't lift it any longer. Murong Shui returned her blade to its sheath. Stunned, Ah-E and Ah-Er could only look as she arrogantly stepped over them. Threaten her. They obviously don't know where they belong. A split tendon for both, so they can't lift their swords any longer. Let's see how they try to stop her. How could well-trained Qin Yen guards be unable to stop a weak girl like her? What a bunch of idiots. Yi Chen's expression darkened. He moved quickly and was in front of Murong Shui in a second. He extended his arm to grab her shoulders. Murong Shui frowned. He was everywhere, she couldn't seem to stop encountering him. She turned sideways and avoided his grip. She then extended her hand and was about to slap him. Yi Chen's mouth curled into a smirk and dodged it. Instead, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her towards him. Murong Shui did not expect it and was frowning as she saw that she was fast approaching Yi Chen's chest. As she was almost in his arms, a hand slapped Yi Chen's hand. An arm grabbed her shoulder and pulled her into a warm hug. A faint smell of bamboo ink encircled her nose. It was such a comforting smell. She looked up and saw a familiar handsome face. Are you okay? Ouyang Xiaochen said, peering down at her, his eyes full of concern. Murong Shui nodded and her face broke into a small smile. I'm fine, you came just in time. Ouyang Xiaochen's mouth curled into a small smile. After he had jumped down from the cliff, he did not see Murong Shui's silhouette. He then used the fastest speed he can manage to find her, but he was still a step behind Yi Chen. Slowly, he raised his head up to look at the culprit. He had an icy gleam in his eyes. Yi Chen, as I've mentioned, don't you dare touch Shui again. Doviko, his hand clenched and unclenched, a strong wind emerged from his sleeve and surrounded Yi Chen from all sides, attacking him. Was Ouyang Xiaochen ready to humiliate himself? The last time when they were on the cliff, he had underestimated him and that made him careless. Because of that, Ouyang Xiaochen had beat him and that was how he ended in the mountain stream. This time, he will be careful in dealing with him. Ouyang Xiaochen will never beat him again. Yi Chen squinted, his hand under his sleeve started to clench and unclench too. A powerful energy surged and rushed towards Ouyang Xiaochen's wind of attack. Ping ping ping, the two powerful forces were at battle with each other in mid-air. Each crash made a frightful sound. Murong Shui, who was standing beside the two, couldn't see how they summoned their energy. She could only see Ouyang Xiaochen's white dress robe flapping in the wind, which was produced by the aftermath of each crash. His dress robe was like a blooming white lotus, compelling energy came propelling out from each petal, aiming its forces at Yi Chen. Yi Chen's expression was hostile, he was also propelling forces mercilessly at Ouyang Xiaochen. Both were competent fighters who had proficient martial arts skills. The battle raged on. For the moment, it was hard to decide who the winner would be. Suddenly, a worrying news came. Prince Jing, Princess Qin. It's no good. When Yi Chen heard the news, his hand trembled slightly, his propelled energy was momentarily disrupted. At that moment, Ouyang Xiaochen's energy breached his defensive barrier and hit his shoulder. The sound, swoosh, was heard and 3-4 deep cuts were formed on his shoulder. Blood spilled from his wounded shoulder. Yi Chen sighed and frowned. His energy had scattered. He glanced at Ouyang Xiaochen, who remained unhurt, and his expression turned downcast. Slowly, he reseated his propelling energy and turned to walk towards Qin Yuan. He will have plenty of chances to fight with Ouyang Xiaochen again, but Qin Yuan had only one life. If she didn't survive, he wouldn't be able to continue fighting. Ouyang Xiaochen saw Yi Yichen's turning silhouette and stopped. His white sleeve cascaded down his handsome, long figure. Murong Shui raised her brow and looked at Qin Yuyuan. She was a curled ball of pain in Yi Yihen's arms, her lips had gone very pale, her face was swollen red, her eyes were shut and her lips were quivering. Cold. It's so cold. Her skin had been raked by tree branches and rocks and many cuts had been formed. If those cuts were not treated properly, they would be infected and she would get a fever. Yi Chen bent down to touch her forehead. From his hand, he felt an abnormally high heat rising and frowned. He then picked her up and paced quickly forward, exit the mountain, return to Jing City. Qin Yuyuan was hurt very badly and needed medical help, fast. Yes sir. And obeyed and picked up their fallen swords on the ground. They quickly followed Yi Chen from behind. Sun Feng and Wu Heng were seen running from the opposite direction. They peered at Qin Yuyuan who was muttering in Yi Chen's arms. Is that Qin Yuyuan? Her face looks so swollen. There's even blood at the corner of her mouth. If she weren't in Yi Chen's arms, they would have never recognized her. Qin Yuyuan had fallen off the cliff with Miss Murong. The condition she's in must have been caused by Miss Murong. At that moment, both of them were overcome with the feeling of admiration for Murong Shui. She was the first person who dared to hurt the princess of Mo Bei to that degree. Ouyang Shitzi, Miss Murong, both bowed in respect. Ouyang Xiaochen nodded and said nothing. Ouyang Shitzi, we have found the Diang grass, it's at that mountain peak. Wu Heng smiled as he said, pointing at the mountain in front. After they had descended from the cliff, they went to find everyone everywhere, but who knew they had stumbled upon the Diang Chao? Really? Murong Shui was looking at the direction he had pointed. She saw medicinal herbs swaying with the wind. She looked closely and found that she was indeed looking at Diang grass. Let's go. Let's be off to harvest them. Murong Shui exclaimed, her eyes were filled with joy and she was running towards the mountain, pulling Ouyang Xiaochen along. Sun Feng and Wu Heng looked at each other then slowly followed them from behind. Yi Chen jolted to a stop, his eyes filled with mysterious shades of enigma. So the true purpose of her coming to Yu Mountain was to harvest the Diang grass. Diang grass was a medicinal herb with yang properties, its effect was far milder than the fire lotus seeds, she must have known that. And yet, she still chose to acquire it. Was she trying to break all relations with him? The truth was that, he didn't want her to die. He just wanted her to apologize and followed his conditions to be his concubine, then he would give her a lifetime supply of fire lotus seeds. But why was she so stubborn? She'd rather suffer than to compromise to him. Chapter 67, Harvesting Diang Grass. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A breeze blew, bringing Ouyang Xiaochen's calm voice to all ears. The peak has a lot of Diang grass. Have you prepared your storage to store them all? Don't worry, I have long prepared my storage. Moreover, I have displaced many guards around it. Even if some villains were to breach the palace, they wouldn't be able to destroy them. Murong Shui smiled. It didn't matter if they had destroyed the Diang grass, there was enough in Yu Mountain right now and even if he tried, Yi Chen would never be able to destroy them completely. With Shen manners, relations and wealth, she could find enough to prolong her life. It was not a problem. Yi Chen's face turned dark. It was he who sent people to breach her palace and annihilate the fire lotus seeds. The villains that she mentioned was secretly referring to him. It had been many days since the incident. She was unhurt and alive. How could she still hate him? Gazing at Murong Shui, she had reached the base and was looking at the peak. Frowning, she said, this peak is so high up and the road leading to it is very steep. If we follow it, will we not slip? To call it a road was honoring it. It was actually just a lightly treaded pathway which was very narrow and smooth. There weren't any branches or roots to hold on to. If one accidentally slipped on the way up, there would be nothing to hold on to, one would simply plunge all the way down. Looking at her worried face, Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes held a tinge of humor. Don't worry, we won't be walking up. If not, Murong Shui jolted, then how would we get up there? Ouyang Xiaochen smirked and scooped her up in a one swoop, his white robe flapping as he did so. Murong Shui was stunned. Murong Shui was held in his arms. Her light green dress robe flapped elegantly and her long, black hair swayed with the wind. The scene was complemented with the graceful fluttering of Ouyang Xiaochen's white robe. It was a charming sight to behold. Yi Chen's face turned livid. His gaze was fixed onto Ouyang Xiaochen and Murong Shui, who was quickly disappearing. As he did so, his aura turned murderous. It left Yi trembling and his eyelids jumping. Yi's eye caught sight of the corner of a purple robe and with an anxious voice he said, "Prince Jing, Princess Qin is getting worse." Yi Chen jolted back to his senses. Looking back, he saw Qin Yuyuan's face had flushed red and her breathing turned rapid. Underneath her thin clothes, he could sense her body temperature raising. Qin Yuyuan's sickness was indeed getting more serious. He couldn't delay any longer. This time, he shall spare Ouyang Xiaochen. He could always come back to get even with him. Holding Qin Yuyuan tightly, Yi Chen turned to take big steps. Without looking back, he issued his command, "Exit the mountain." Halfway up the peak, Ouyang Xiaochen glanced at him. He smirked. Not long after that, he had reached the peak. Murong Shui's eyes swept nervously from side to side. She rolled out of his arms and tumbled on the ground. The ground she landed on was a golden landscape. Countless dian grass basked in the sun, swaying as the wind blew. There were so many. She might not even be able to finish it in her lifetime. Even if her attacks came more often, she wouldn't need to worry. Murong Shui pulled out her dagger. Normally, herbs were harvested using specialized tools, but she only had her dagger and nothing else. It was her only option. Ouyang Xiaochen looked at her dagger and frowned. There are at least a few thousand of them here. You wouldn't be able to finish harvesting them even if you had 3 days. Then what should I do? Murong Shui looked at him. Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes filled with scorn. There was much simpler way and yet she couldn't think of it. What an idiot. With the snap of his fingers, a powerful energy flew out and crossed over the stems of the dian grass. At that moment, all the stems it passed over were cut and they fell neatly onto the ground. Amazing. Murong Shui widened her eyes with shock. People who had mastered high-level martial arts were indeed not the same. Not only could they go up and down mountain peaks with ease, they could also cut dian grass in a blink of an eye. They were even better than modern harvesting machines. Indeed, the rumors about Ouyang Shixi weren't false at all. Looking down, she saw Sun Feng and Wu Heng carrying about 10 bamboo baskets. She hurried over to take one and happily filled the basket with the harvested dian grass. 2 hours later, all the dian grass had been harvested. Murong Shui, Ouyang Xiaochen, Sun Feng and Wu Heng descended the peak and exited the mountain with their yield. At the base of the mountain, there were 3 transports waiting. One was the Zhen Manor's horse carriage, the other 2 were horse carts. Murong Shui commanded her workers to move the dian grass onto the horse carts and carefully tied them. After making sure that they were secured in place, Murong Shui sighed with relief. With all this dian grass, finally, she can secure her life. The faint smell of tea encircled her nostrils. It was Ouyang Xiaochen drinking tea under a big tree. Murong Shui blinked and walked over to him. Smiling, she said, "Thank you so much for your help, Ouyang Shixi. How did you get to Yu Mountain?" "Using my martial arts skills, Qin Gong." Ouyang Xiaochen replied calmly. His eyes were partially hidden behind the steam of his tea and were unreadable. Murong Shui jolted. It was no wonder that other than her own vehicles, she did not see a carriage or horse in sight. He didn't use any of those to get here. Ouyang Xiaochen had come to Yu Mountain from Jing City using his own ability and had accompanied her 2 days and a night. He had helped her immensely. He must have used up a lot of his stamina and strength. He also did not rest much during the trip, he must be very tired. It would be cruel to let him return to the city on his own. Ouyang, if you don't mind, you could sit with me in the horse carriage to return to Jing City. Regarding Sun Feng and Wu Heng, you could let them sit with the guards on the horse carts. All right. Ouyang Xiaochen responded after pondering for a moment and nodded. He then put down his tea and walked towards the horse carriage. The corner of his mouth broke into a small smile. Inside the carriage, it was laid out with expensive carpet. A faint fragrance filled his nostrils. It was emanating from Murong Shui. Ouyang Xiaochen's face became downcast when he saw Murong Shui's exhausted face. Frowning, he asked, "Are you very tired?" Murong Shui nodded. She had spent 2 days and 2 nights without resting much, she was drained. Ouyang Shitzi, there are tea leaves, tea utensils, water, chess, books and more in the drawer. Please help yourself, I'm going to rest. Back in the modern era, it wasn't a problem for her to stay up for 3 days and 3 nights. But her current body was too weak, it couldn't be pushed for long. This was its limit. All right. Ouyang Xiaochen nodded. He saw Murong Shui took out a pillow from the drawer and fell asleep. She didn't even bother to cover herself with a blanket. How can she be so uncaring of herself? Again, Ouyang Xiaochen frowned. He was about to take a blanket out of the drawer when he saw her frowning in her sleep, it was as if she was having a bad dream. He closed the drawer. Carefully, he eased Murong Shui into his arms. Chapter 68, Assassins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Murong Shui was exhausted. The slight shifting of places didn't make her open her eyes. Instead, she merely switched her position to find a comfortable spot in Ouyang Xiaochen's arms. Having found it, she buried her head in it and continued to sleep soundlessly. It was as if she didn't have any bones. She was soft and her faint fragrance encircled the carriage. It caused the calm aura of Ouyang Xiaochen to ripple. Peering down at her, he saw that she was breathing lightly, her long eyelashes casted shadows beneath them and her pink lips were pursed together lightly. It was as if they were waiting for someone to kiss them. Slowly, Ouyang Xiaochen reached down and lightly placed his lips on hers. Her lips felt soft and sweet. However, his light kiss had intruded her constant breathing. Murong Shui had felt some discomfort in her sleep. Her eyebrows knitted together lightly. She then buried her face deeper into his arms, avoiding the chance of another kiss. Gazing at her half-buried face in his arms, Ouyang Xiaochen lightly grimaced. Did she just reject him? Or was it because she didn't like people to disturb her while she was sleeping? Ouyang Xiaochen slowly straightened his back. He looked at her quietly, his eyes held shades of an enigma. Suddenly, his expression darkened. He then opened the hatch above the carriage, carried Murong Shui and flew out. While he was halfway in the air, a loud bang was heard. The luxurious horse carriage was blown to smithereens, its wooden structure ricocheted away and smoke rose from it. Murong Shui awakened at the sound of the explosion and looked at the blown-apart carriage. She immediately knew what had happened. Her face darkened to a murderous shade. The horse carriage had the Zhen Manners logo on it. The person who buried the bomb beneath it was obviously aiming for her. Ouyang Xiaochen slowly set Murong Shui down safely on the ground. All of a sudden, they heard something aerial heading towards them. Murong Shui turned to look and saw countless black-feathered arrows heading towards them from all directions. The sky was dense with them. Assassins! Protect Miss Murong and Ouyang, someone exclaimed. Wu Heng, Sun Feng and the Zhen Manners guards assembled around Murong Shui and Ouyang, forming a protective circle. They used their blades to stop the impending arrows. Only the sound of repelling the arrows were heard. Having been repelled, the arrows dropped on the ground. But a few guards got hit too. Ouyang Xiaochen held Murong Shui lightly and saw the direction where the arrows were coming from. It was as if he was already used to being ambushed. The arrows were raining hard on them, but the swords were also fast to repel them. Sun Feng and Wu Heng's swords were waving around so much that even wind couldn't penetrate their swings. For now, the rain of arrows couldn't hurt Murong Shui and Ouyang Xiaochen. In another place, the black-shirt aggressors saw that the arrows had no effect. They lightly waved their hands and the others stopped shooting their arrows. Instead, they unsheathed their long swords and attacked. Sun Feng, Wu Heng and the palace's guards also did the same and met the aggressors head-on. At that moment, the air was filled with the battle's rage. More than 10 people were in the fight. One couldn't see much, but they could see Sun Feng and Wu Heng's swords as fast as the wind. Wherever they had swung their swords, black-shirt aggressors would fall on the ground. Sun Feng and Wu Heng's martial arts skills are quite decent. Murong Shui praised. Ouyang Xiaochen had trained them and indeed, they had stood out. They are the best among my guards. Even though the black-shirt aggressors are many, but they are not their opponents. Ouyang Xiaochen replied calmly. Suddenly, they heard another aerial attack. It was an arrow and it was aiming for Murong Shui. Ouyang Xiaochen released an energy from within and aimed for the fast-approaching arrow. Ping! The arrow exploded in mid-air. The dense smell of explosives filled the air. Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes filled with a dangerous gleam. They had actually tried to plot against their own, disgusting. Beneath his sleeve, he clenched and unclenched his fist. A powerful energy surged out and hit the black-shirt aggressors, which caused them to spit out blood. About 10 of them vomited blood and fell dead. The battlefield was filled with the thick scent of spilled blood. Ouyang Xiaochen stopped. His expression was icy and his robe flapped in the wind, undamaged. Most of the black-shirt aggressors lied defeated on the ground. Their corpses stained the yellow earth with fresh blood. Murong Shui blinked. They had only fought for a while, but now, all of the assassins were dead. Ouyang Xiaochen's martial arts were incredible, however. Ouyang Shitzi, you didn't leave anyone alive. There's someone still alive over there. Ouyang Xiaochen pointed as a black-shirt man rose out from the pile of corpses. He fell in front of it Murong Shui. His entire body and face were covered with blood and his eyes were rolling in his head. Murong Shui pulled away his black mask. She pulled his collar and threatened him, "Who sent you to kill me?" Still, the man's eyes were rolling. "You better tell the truth, don't make up someone to deceive me. There are only a few who hate me and want me dead, even I can make a guess. I just need to confirm who it is with you. If you lie, I will make you wish you were dead." Murong Shui smiled, which was refreshing, but her eyes were filled with malice. It made the man catch his breath. The man returned to his senses. It was then his eyes were filled with fear. "It was your step-grandmother, Du, who sent us. She gave us 10,000 silver pieces. To take your life. She had told us you would use this road back." "Ah, so it was that old hag, thank you very much." Murong Shui smiled and lacerated his throat. The man widened his eyes and fell heavily to the ground. Fresh blood was pouring from the cut and stained the ground red. Wu Heng raised his brow, puzzled. He said, "Miss Murong, why did you not keep him alive as evidence and take him back to your step-grandmother? Ambushing the rich and the noble was a serious crime. If proven, Madame Du would definitely be sent to prison. Madame Du is very clever. She wouldn't leave any traces of her deal with them. With just the testimony of this man, it wouldn't be enough to prove that she was involved. Moreover, she would most probably turn around and accuse me of false allegations. Then, what are you going to do?" Wu Heng's face was filled with curiosity. letting Madame Du off the hook. This wasn't what Murong Shui would do. Madame Du had sent me an unexpected gift. Of course it would be polite to send one back to her. Murong Shui smiled coyly, her eyes were filled with hostility. Chapter 69, Beating Madame Du. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Back in the Zhen Manor, Madame Du was wearing a blue dress robe. On her head, she wore an ornate headband with a blue gem. She was in a hearty mood and was seated in front of a round table having her breakfast. The table was filled with plum cakes, pineapple cakes, chicken, duck and porridge. The smell was enough to send one drooling. Madame Du was eating a bowl of porridge. Discreetly, she asked, "Grandma Guo, have we received any news from there?" Grandma Guo was Madame Du's maid servant and was very much trusted by her. Everything that Du had commanded was carried out or see to by her. Madame Du's ask was very cautious, but Grandma Guo had understood. "Madam, there hasn't been any news." Madame Du jolted with shock and frowned. "It has been a long while and there hasn't been any news. What if something bad had happened?" Grandma Guo whispered in reply, "Madam, don't you worry, we hired Qin Yan's most ruthless and powerful assassins. Even if Murong Shui is strong, she wouldn't have escaped." "Do you mean him?" An icy voice rung out and an indistinguishable object flew across the room and landed in front of Madame Du. Madame Du lowered her head and peering at her was severed head with bloodshot eyes. There was blood oozing out from the eyes and the entire head was drenched with it. Drops of it had made its way into Madame Du's porridge, staining it red. "Ah!" Madame Du screamed out in terror. Her arms were flailing with fear and they accidentally hit the severed head. It rolled under the table. Madame Du stood up panically and wanted to leave the table, but she slipped and fell with a heavy thud. In the corner of her trembling eyes, she looked up as Murong Shui walked slowly towards her. Her light blue dress robe was swaying with her movement and her beautiful face was smiling. Her eyes, however, were cold with malice. You. Madame Du pointed at Murong Shui. She was so stunned she couldn't speak, her body trembled like sieving flour. Murong Shui had returned, she was really back. "Step-grandmother, I am human, not a ghost, you need not be so surprised. Even though you have hired many assassins to kill me, but I got lucky and survived." "But they didn't." Murong Shui smiled, she was holding more than one severed head. One by one, she threw them mercilessly at Madame Du. "Surely, they aren't strangers to you. They are the assassins you hired. You spent so much silver but couldn't get rid of me, what a pity. So I brought back their heads to let you know that you have bought their lives instead and your pay didn't go to waste." Madame Du was just the wife of a rich man. She knew how to scheme and hire assassins, but she had never seen such a gory and bloody scene. The bloody heads Murong Shui threw had left her robe soaked with blood. It had stained her skin and she could feel the stickiness of it. It made the hair on her neck stood at ends. And those heads had vacant eyes, it was as if they were glaring at her, making soundless accusations at her. She broke down into a cry, "Help me! Help me!" Grandma Guo came to her senses and paced quickly to put herself in front of Madame Du. She looked coldly at Murong Shui and said, "Madame happens to be your great-grandmother. Even if she did do something wrong, you are not fit to punish her. Get lost." Murong Shui kicked Grandma Guo away. Grandma Guo was kicked 3 to 4 meters afar. She knocked against the wall and fell with a heavy thud. She spat out blood, it felt as if all her bones in her body had shattered. "The owner of this palace is speaking, when was it your turn to intervene?" Murong Shui peered at Grandma Guo, "You think I don't know that you are her accomplice? You're also involved in hiring assassins to kill me. And you still use that old hag's position to threaten me. You obviously don't know where you belong." Murong Shui kicked Grandma Guo once more. She rolled 3 to 4 meters away and hit the wall. She wailed with pain before passing out. Murong Shue gracefully walked towards Madame Du. She then lifted one of the heads and swayed it in front of Madame Du. It's just a head, everyone has one of those on top of their necks. It's not like you've never seen one before, why are you so afraid? Is it because you feel guilty? Oh, so you can feel guilt too, what a rare thing to witness. A sudden shout filled the air. Madame Du was charging towards Murong Shue with a dangerously sharp hairpin, flames of anger ablaze in her eyes. I'll kill you, Murong Shue. Kill her. Clearly, she doesn't know what she's capable of. Murong Shue laughed coldly. She grabbed her wrist roughly and applied pressure. The breaking of bones could be heard. She had broken Madame Du's wrist. The hairpin fell on the ground. Ah! Madame Du wailed loudly with pain. Murong Shue raised her brow and gave her a brutal kick. Shut up. Madame Du's aged body hit the wall from the impact and her wailing stopped. Beads of sweat rolled down her wrinkled face and her brows knitted together. She curled up into a ball of pathetic agony. Murong Shue walked up to her and gave her another merciless kick which made her roll to the table and hit it with a heavy thud. The impact sent the contents of the table crashing and pouring onto her, plates, bowls, food. It was a terribly humiliating sight. Murong Shue walked towards her slowly. Ignoring the leftover food all over Du, she grabbed her collar when suddenly a voice said, she is well advanced in her years and can't take many blows. If you keep kicking her, she might lose her life. Ah, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Murong Shue smiled and grabbed Du's collar even more tightly, all because this is your first crime, I am sparing you. If you dare hire assassins to kill me again, I will cut your head off and kick it like a ball. After threatening Madame Du, she released her grip and Du collapsed. Without turning her head, she walked out of the room. The air once again carried her icy warning to Madame Du, don't treat me as a joke, I have never made jokes to my enemies. Even if you borrow the royal palace's bodyguards, I can still kill you. The maidservants who were in the room were trembling terribly in the corner. Murong Shue ignored them and walked out. An arm lied on the floor, blocking her way. Murong Shue pretended not to see it and stepped on it while exiting. Ah! Grandma Gui yelled, her wail of pain so loud that it shook the heavens above. Chapter 70, No Longer a Dandy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I'm posting today. Maniacally laughs. Man, you guys don't know what's gonna hit you in these next chapters. Mwahahahahahaha. Grins. Man, life is great. Murong Shue is a killer, catch her immediately. Madame Du collapsed on the floor, yelling at the top of her lungs. The courtyard was empty, not even a single shadow in sight. Her order was ignored among the silence. Madame Du was injured badly, yet she still wanted to teach Murong Shue a lesson. Murong Shue smirked at her weakness. Guards. Rapid footsteps could be heard, penetrating the stillness. More than 10 guards stepped into the courtyard of Yutang. They were all armed with swords on their waist belt. They lined up in a uniform manner and responded with steadfastness, as you wish, my lady. Madame Du is mentally unstable, keep an eye on her and close down this courtyard. Make sure to double the security, no one could enter or leave here without my order. Murong Shue instructed. Yes. The guards followed her command and stood around the courtyard, not even one eye could see through. Madame Du feared for her life, her guards had turned their backs against her and listened to Murong Shue now. How could she have not heard about this huge news? Murong Shue, this sly woman. Noticing the glare from her back, Murong Shue ignored the old lady and walked out from the courtyard. Madame Du was in her late 50s, she was getting older and soon enough, she would be lying in her own grave. Murong Yi was only 14, even though he was incapable of doing anything, he was the heir of their house. The whole manor belonged to him in the future and plenty of guards would kneel before him asking for favors. Any smart person on earth would choose to follow Murong Yi instead of Madame Du. Madame Du had sons and daughters, her mother was still alive too. Murong Shue could not let her die just this soon, otherwise, her plan would have backfired. Instead, she locked her up in this courtyard and let her live the rest of life in here. It was all up to Madame Du at this point if she wanted to stay alive. Wu Heng bit his lip as he watched the courtyard door closed little by little. Madame Du was aging and she was severely injured, she had to receive medical treatment straight away. Murong Shui not only stopped the guards to call on doctors, she had locked Madame Du away and let her die slowly. It was indeed a blameless plan for murder. Murong Shui finally had her revenge, she hopped light-heartedly, Ouyang. Ouyang smiled softly as he saw her lovely face, I've already placed the Diang grass into your storeroom. Thank you so much. Murong Shui was glad, you've helped me a big time, I'll treat you some tea. Wu Heng bit his lip again and thought to himself, Ouyang had helped Murong Shui to find the magical Diang grass, he had also saved her life in the carriage and brought back heads of the ninjas, and now she repaid him with only tea, what an ungenerous person. This tea is just to express my gratitude, I will always remember your good deeds, if you need any help in the future, please don't hesitate to ask favor from me, I will definitely help you. Murong Shui promised with a big smile on her face. Wu Heng coughed uncomfortably when he heard that, he disappeared promptly. He had misunderstood Murong Shui's intention, he was ashamed for himself and hid away. So, we're going to Luo Shuigu for tea? Ouyang asked unresponsively. Correct. Murong Shui nodded her head. Let's go then. Ouyang flicked his sleeve to his back and walked away. Murong Shui followed him from behind to the door, strolling along the path and headed towards Luo Shuigu. From afar, there was someone sitting by the pond. He was covered in army green robe, watching the sky elegantly, it was Murong Yi for sure. His eyes were filled with doubt and looked as if he was thinking deeply about something. Murong Shui raised her eyebrows and asked, Brother, how's your injury? Murong Yi regained back his posture when he heard his sister's soft voice. He walked towards her and checked on her from up to down, making sure she was safe and sound, it's good to have you back here safely, I'm doing fine, my wounds are recovering. He realized Ouyang was standing beside and bowed in respect, I couldn't thank you enough for how you've helped my little sister. It was nothing, my pleasure. Ouyang stated. Brother, your body is fine now, why didn't you go to gambling with your bunch of lousy friends? Murong Shui joked. You've said so clearly that they're lousy friends. I no longer want to join them nor gamble, I'm studying very hard right now. Murong Yi waved a book in his hand to her proudly. Murong Shui could not believe her own eyes, then she realized something, but your book. It was upside down. Murong Yi stunned and looked at the book, the title of the book, Luan Yu, was indeed tilted upside down. Murong Ye's face turned red and he coughed to cover up his embarrassment. He was trying to study very hard but he was just not the right person to do so, he went all nuts reading those block letters, what more to understand the content. Anyways, why did you change your mind all of the sudden? Murong Shui was curious of her brother's change. Murong Yi used to enjoy spending his life playing and fooling around, never did he once wanted to study. I want to stop being so dandy. Murong Yi mumbled. Yi Chen went to war with the armies when he was 14 and was rewarded. Yang traveled around the world and came back as a wise man when he was 14. As for him, all he did when he was 14 were gambling and being lazy, if he continued his life in this way, he would never be like them even when he was 80. He wanted to please everyone by studying and gaining knowledge, he did not want people to shake their heads in disappointment when they looked at him. Murong Yi was serious about changing his life, was he prompted by Song Qingyan's words. It did not matter now as long as he was determined in this, there's this respectable general in Chao, if you don't like to study, you can learn some fighting skills from him. Murong Shui encouraged him. Murong Yi thought for a moment, fighting skills. Exactly, I know you didn't like to study, even if you try hard enough, you won't be able to understand it. Might as well learn some fighting skills, remember how you liked it last time when Uncle Hui used to teach you. The master saw both of them when they were learning fighting skills. He used to be so energetic and eager to learn, unfortunately his laziness took over, thus Muronyi had only 40.9 skills in 10 years of practicing. But, this time we won't ask the teacher to come over here to teach, you'll have to go over to his site, in that way, you get to learn some more knowledge as well. Muronyi was an intelligent man, too bad he was lazy. Moreover there was no one to guide him along his life, that was why he became lazy and sluggish. Strictness was practiced in the soldier camp, if he could stand the army training, he would definitely turn into a new leaf.